2 summers ago, I spread about $2 of one common kitchen leftover across one corner of my test bed. 6 weeks later, I dug a single shovelful and counted 41 earthworms. The control corner, same soil, same water, had 4. I want you to understand what that means. The fertilizer industry sells you bags of worm castings for $30 a sack. The soil amendment companies sell you living worms by mail. I did it for the price of a cup of coffee, and the worms came on their own. This is the kind of thing the bagged soil business has no reason to tell you. Stay with me to the end because there's one timing detail when I lay this down that doubled my worm count, and almost nobody does it. Let me tell you who I'm talking about because I don't deal in vague villains. The force here is the soil amendment retail industry, the bagged soil business, the garden center shelves stacked with sacks of biology. Walk into any garden center this weekend and you'll find worm castings selling for $25 to $30 a sack. Go online and you'll find live red wigglers shipped to your door at roughly $40 a pound. I want you to check those numbers yourself. They're not hard to find. That's the whole point. Here's what happened. Before bagged amendments existed, gardeners didn't buy worms. They built the conditions that drew worms in. Attracting earthworms was something you did, not something you purchased. Then the home garden retail boom came along, and somewhere in there, a living condition got reframed as a product on a shelf. Soil biology stopped being something you create and became something you buy. And the stakes are real. I've watched gardeners spend $30, $40, $50 a season buying biology their own soil would recruit for free. Worse, the bag and till habit that comes with all this works against you. Heavy tilling chops up the worms you already have. Sterile, bagged mixes give them nothing to eat. So you end up paying to replace the very population your own practices are suppressing. I'm not telling you this as a man with a theory. I'm a retired chemistry teacher who's gardened the same Black Mountain plot for 22 years and written it all down. I tested this on my own test bed. The numbers held up. All right, let us keep going. Because the method itself is almost insultingly simple once you see it laid out. Let me name it plainly. The $2 of kitchen leftover I spread across that corner was used coffee grounds, spent grounds, the wet, dark stuff left sitting in the filter after the coffee's already been brewed and poured. I didn't grow them, and I didn't buy them at any garden centre. I drove down to a coffee shop in town and asked for their used grounds. A lot of shops will hand them to you by the bucket just to get rid of them, because otherwise they're paying to haul that wet weight to the landfill. The $2 I'm quoting covers a 5-gallon bucket. If a shop charges anything at all, and plenty of them won't charge you a cent, that bucket works out to roughly 2 pounds of usable grounds once it's spread out. I'd been looking for the cheapest possible way to wake up the heavy clay loam we've got here in the foothills, and you don't get much cheaper than free. And spread is the operative word. I laid them down thin across that one test bed corner, about a 1/4 inch, no more. A light dusting over the soil surface, not a dump, not a pile. That was the entire operation. $2, a thin layer, and I walked away and let the soil go to work. This is exactly the kind of free fix the bag aisle has no reason to ever put in front of you. There's no margin in telling a gardener to drive over to a coffee shop with an empty bucket. Now here is the science, because the why matters a good deal more than the what. Most people have heard somewhere that coffee grounds are acidic and they're nervous about putting them anywhere near a vegetable bed. That's true of fresh grounds. But used grounds are a completely different animal. Once you brew a pot of coffee, most of that acidity ends up in the cup. The spent grounds left behind sit right around pH 6.5 to 6.8. What I mean by that is they're essentially neutral. The same sweet spot most vegetables and most earthworms actually prefer. Not an acid bomb, near neutral. What those grounds bring to the soil comes down to 3 things. First, organic carbon. That's food. Second, a little nitrogen, somewhere around 2% by weight. And third, grit. Coffee grounds are fine, gritty particles, and earthworms swallow grit on purpose to grind their food down in their gizzards, the same way a chicken swallows gravel. So in one move, you're handing the worms a meal and the tool they use to eat it. But the real engine here is smaller than any worm. When that carbon and that nitrogen hit the top inch of moist soil, they set off a microbial bloom. Bacteria and fungi multiplying fast on a fresh food source. That bloom is what the worms are truly chasing. Earthworms feed on decomposing organic matter and on the microbes doing the decomposing. So they migrate toward the food, toward the microbes, and toward the moisture those grounds hold against the surface. And that is precisely why no industry could ever fully bury this. You can stop selling a method. You cannot repeal soil chemistry. The worms show up because the biology pulls them in, and the biology has never once read a marketing brochure. So let's talk about what actually happened down in the dirt. 6 weeks after I laid those grounds down, I took my shovel to the treated corner and turned over a single shovelful. I counted 41 earthworms in it. Then I walked the few feet over to the control corner. Same bed, same soil, same water, no grounds. And turned an identical shovelful. 4 worms, 41 against 4. I wrote both numbers down in the notebook that same afternoon because the plant doesn't lie and the records don't lie. I've got 22 years of those notebooks stacked on a shelf in the garage, and that single page is one of the cleanest results in all of them. And the worm count was only the headline. The season-long change in that corner is what really convinced me. By the middle of summer, that soil had a looser tilth. I could push my hand straight into it, where the control corner stayed tight and compacted. Water drained through it faster after one of our hard mountain rains, instead of standing and pooling on top. And here's the part I genuinely didn't expect. It held its moisture longer between waterings. All those worm channels and all those castings had quietly changed the structure of the soil. The worms were doing the same tilling I used to do with a garden fork, except they never stopped, and they never chopped themselves to pieces doing it. Now, I'm a tester by nature, so I ran the comparison I knew I had to run. That same season, I bought a $30 bag of premium worm castings and worked it into a third section at the rate printed on the bag. The corner where I attracted worms for $2 outperformed the corner where I bought the castings for $30. Better structure, more worms by fall, and it kept on improving after the bag was long spent. $30 bought me one single application. $2 built me a living population that kept working for free. Now stay with me here, because this is exactly where most people go wrong, and the standard advice never warns them about a bit of it. There are 2 mistakes that make coffee grounds fail completely, and I'll be honest with you, I made both of them before I sorted it out. I lost the better part of a season learning it the hard way. The first is using fresh grounds instead of spent ones. Fresh, unbrewed grounds still carry the caffeine and the acidity and both of those stress earthworms. Caffeine is a natural pesticide the coffee plant produces for that very purpose. Put fresh grounds down and you'll actually repel the worms you're trying so hard to attract. It has to be used grounds. The brewing is the step that makes them safe. The second mistake is piling them on thick. I see folks dump an inch or 2 of wet grounds down like a mulch, figuring more has to be better. It is not. A thick layer of those fine grounds mats together and turns hydrophobic. It starts shedding water instead of soaking it up. And underneath that mat, it goes anaerobic. No oxygen. That sour, airless layer drives worms straight off. A 1/4 inch breathes. An inch suffocates. That's the whole difference. And one more thing tied right to it. Do not till the grounds in. Every instinct tells you to work them down into the root zone. Don't. The earthworms that build your topsoil feed at the surface, and they pull material down themselves on their own schedule. Leave the grounds sitting on top and let the worms do the hauling. Bury them yourself, and you've done the worms' job badly and cut it off from the surface buffet it was coming up for in the first place. None of that is complicated. But you will not find a word of it on the back of a bag, because the bag was never trying to teach you how to skip the bag. Now, before we keep going, I want to share something with you. Everything I've just shown you, attracting worms, building that living, biologically active soil, is one piece of a bigger system, and the full version is laid out in my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. Chapter 3 is the one that fits this video. It's called Soil Reset, the Chemistry of Fertility. And it covers organic matter targets, judging your compost quality, and the soil chemistry that draws and holds worms, with diagrams for every bit of it. It's $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, take a second now, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. No rush, I'll be right here. If you're already on a phone or laptop, the link is in the description. This is for the gardener who's done guessing and wants to start measuring. All right, let us keep going. So, why does this stay out of the standard advice? Why doesn't every garden article that mentions worms just tell you to spread your coffee waste and wait? Follow the money, the same way I followed the worm count. There's a thriving retail category built on selling you soil biology, those $25 to $30 bags of castings, those $40 a pound live red wigglers shipped in the mail. A business built on selling biology has no earthly incentive to teach you that the biology will arrive on its own for the price of a coffee. And the whole culture of the garden centre pushes the same direction. Buy the bag, buy the worms, buy the mix. Building habitat doesn't ring up at the register. Buying biology does. Now, let me be honest with you, because you're too sharp for a one-sided story. Purchased castings and mail order worms are not a scam. They work. If you're starting a brand new sterile raised bed with no life in it yet, or you're running an indoor vermicompost bin through the winter, buying worms makes real sense. There's a place for it. But for an established outdoor bed, the kind most of you are standing in front of, attracting your native worms wins on every count. It's cheaper, it's self-sustaining, and it compounds year over year as the population grows and the castings build. Here's the cost that should bother you. Every season you spend buying biology, you're paying for something your own soil would recruit for free. And the bag and till habit that comes bundled with all that buying is quietly suppressing the very worms you already have. You're paying to replace what you're paying to destroy. That's not a conspiracy. It's just an incentive nobody bothered to point out to you. All right, I promised you one more layer, the timing detail from the start, and this is the one almost nobody does. When you lay the grounds down matters as much as what you lay down. Spread them in the evening, right before a forecast rain. Or if no rain is coming, water them in at dusk. Here's why. Earthworms surface feed at night and in high humidity. That's when they come up. A dry application laid down in the middle of the day does the opposite of what you want. The grounds crust over in the sun and the worms never rise to meet them. I tested both. Same grounds, same corner, 2 seasons. The midday dry application drew about 20 worms per shovelful. Not bad. But the dusk application, laid down right before the rain came through, drew the 41. Same coffee, same bed, a clean doubling just from the hour on the clock when I spread it. And that's the piece the standard advice always skips. It tells you to add coffee grounds and stops right there. It names the ingredient and never says a word about the timing. But my notebook caught it because I ran the comparison instead of guessing, and 20 versus 41 is too big a gap to ignore. Lay it down at dusk before the rain. That's the whole secret inside the secret. All right, before I let you go, the only reason I can hand you 41 versus 4 or 20 versus 41 is that I counted and I wrote it down. That record-keeping discipline is exactly what Chapter 2 of the book teaches you to do in your own garden. It's called the Measurement Foundation. What to actually track, the simple notebook method I've used for 22 years, and how to set your baseline so you can prove what's working instead of guessing at it. Now you've got the free method. The book gives you the system to measure your own results. It's $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're on the television, grab your phone and scan that QR code on the screen. Take your time. I'll wait. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link's down in the description. So that's the whole thing. Used coffee grounds, laid down thin at dusk before a rain, pulling 41 worms, a shovelful for about $2, while the bag aisle sells you the same biology for $30. Now you can build your worms instead of buying them. Next time I'll get into a Depression-era amendment trick I found in a 1943 pamphlet and tested against modern practice in my own testbed. And the old method won. Your conditions might be different, so test this on one corner before you commit the whole bed. All right, that's what I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one.